On June 4, 2026, I filmed the clearest Bigfoot sighting ever captured, and I nearly didn't make it back to show anyone. I was pinned between two of them with no signal, and the most mind-blowing footage sitting on my SD card. What happened on that ridge that morning is the most terrifying moment I've ever experienced. My name is Aaron Granger. I'm 43 years old and based in the Pacific Northwest. I've spent most of my adult life outdoors. For nearly 15 years, I worked in trail maintenance, starting before sunrise and spending long days alone in remote landscapes that most people only ever glimpse from a car window. These days, I spend my weekends doing wilderness photography. It's not a profession or a side business, it's simply how I reconnect with the places that have always felt like home. Most of my trips out there are forgettable in the best way. June 4th was the one where I found myself stuck on a ridge with Bigfoot standing between me and my car, thinking this might genuinely be how it ends for me. The area I'd picked sits deep inside a stretch of old-growth Douglas fir in the Pacific Northwest that most people don't bother with. No maintained trails or markers, no cell reception past the first quarter mile. The kind of place where if something goes wrong, I know nobody's coming. I'd known about it from my trail work days. We skirted the edges of it occasionally, but never went in. The locals who knew the area didn't really talk about why they avoided it. They just did. I never pushed on that. I probably should have. A guy I used to work with on trail crews mentioned the area a few months earlier. He said the eastern ridge caught the morning light perfectly and that he'd always wanted to photograph it but never got around to it. That was enough to put the idea in my head. I picked a Thursday, set my alarm, and figured I'd be in and out before most people were even awake. Simple enough. I also came more prepared than usual for this one. A few days before, I'd driven out to the area to scout it and planted a trail camera on a tree upslope from the ridge, motion activated, running for days by the time Thursday came. I also packed my thermal monocular and clipped a GoPro to my bag. I wanted as many angles as possible. Not fear exactly, more like that nagging feeling you get when you're halfway down the road and suddenly can't remember whether you locked the front door. Nothing concrete, nothing I could point to, just a persistent sense that I'd forgotten something important. I packed my gear anyway and told myself it was nothing. I parked just off the logging road at around 3:50 that morning. The first thing I noticed was the cold, and I mean really cold. Not just the usual pre-dawn chill. This was June. It had no business being that temperature. Out of habit, I checked my phone. No signal, which was exactly what I expected. I geared up, switched on my headlamp, and started hiking in. The darkness felt different too. I've done plenty of pre-dawn shoots over the years, and normally there's something familiar about being out there before sunrise. The woods have their own rhythm. You hear insects, the occasional bird, branches moving in the wind. Even in the dark, it feels alive. That morning, none of that was there. The forest was quiet enough that I could hear my own footsteps echoing back through the trees. About 10 minutes in, I stopped and swept my headlamp across the trail. Actually, before that, I stopped at the trail camera first, checked the feed quickly. Still armed, still recording, nothing significant on it yet. I remounted it and kept moving. It had rained a couple of days earlier and the soil was still soft enough to hold tracks clearly. I expected to see the usual signs of movement, deer, raccoons, maybe a coyote. There was nothing. I crouched down and looked more closely, thinking maybe I was missing something, but the trail was clean. No hoof prints, no paw prints, nothing that suggested an animal had passed through recently. That wasn't normal. In a stretch of forest like that, something is always moving, especially at night. Even if you don't see it, you see the evidence. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the ground, trying to come up with a reasonable explanation. Then I got back to my feet and kept walking. I should have turned around right then. I'd been on the trail for about 20 minutes when every sound around me stopped. Not gradually either. It wasn't like one bird went quiet and then another. It all vanished at once. If you've spent enough time in the woods, you learn to pay attention to things like that. Back when I was doing trail work, I learned that kind of silence usually means something large is nearby. The animals know before you do. I stopped where I was and listened. I raised the thermal monocular first. No point reaching for the main camera yet. There was no visible light to work with. I pointed it upslope and immediately picked up a heat signature. Large. Much larger than a deer, just sitting there in the thermal, stationary, about 80 yards up. My headlamp was still on. After a second, I clicked it off and stood there in the dark, waiting. I figured I'd hear something eventually, a branch snapping, movement in the brush, anything that would explain it. But nothing did. The silence didn't break. It just stayed there, pressing in from every direction. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. Still nothing. That's when I saw it. I continued watching through the thermal scope and noticed that the heat signature had started moving. It was upright, large, and appeared to be bipedal. The thermal imaging confirmed what my eyes still could not make out through the trees. There was movement in the tree line maybe 80 or 90 yards upslope from where I was standing. At first, it was just a shape slipping between the trunks. My eyes kept losing it and finding it again. I remember thinking it had to be a bear. A black bear can look surprisingly human in bad light. I've had them stand up on hind legs before. I've watched them move through brush at dawn when all you can really make out is a silhouette. But this wasn't doing what a bear does. It wasn't stopping to sniff. It wasn't weaving around obstacles or dropping down on all fours. It was covering ground in a straight line, moving between the trees with long, measured strides. I found myself trying to judge its height against the surrounding timber. Every time it passed a trunk, it seemed bigger than my brain wanted it to be. Then I thought maybe it was a person. But then, nobody should have been out there at that hour. Even if someone was, the nearest access point was miles away. I remember noticing how little of it I could actually see. The trees kept breaking up the outline. 1 second, I'd catch a shoulder, or what looked like a shoulder, then a leg, then just darkness again. But every glimpse gave me the same impression, upright, broad, and far larger than anything I expected to find in those woods. I didn't move or make a sound. I just stood there staring into the trees, waiting for it to become something I could recognize. I don't know exactly when the decision clicked, but at some point my hands just went to the camera. I'd been shooting long exposures earlier that morning, so it was already set up for low light. High sensitivity, wide open aperture, everything tuned for the conditions. I switched it over to video, kept my movements slow, and pressed record. It was too dark, too far away, and the trees kept breaking up the outline. I figured the camera might catch details I was missing at the moment, so I kept recording. The GoPro on my bag had been running the whole session. I'd clipped it on before I left the car and hadn't thought about it since. It was pointed back behind me, passively capturing everything I couldn't see. I didn't realize how important that would turn out to be until much later. The sky was just starting to change by then, that deep blue-gray light you get maybe 20 minutes before sunrise. There was finally enough light filtering through the canopy to separate shapes from shadows. That's when it stepped out of the tree line. It was completely upright. The size of it stopped me cold. Even at that distance, something about its proportions felt wrong. What bothered me more was how still it was. When an animal freezes, it doesn't stay perfectly motionless. There's always some movement, a shift in weight, a turn of the head, something. This thing didn't seem to move at all. I tightened my grip on the camera and kept filming. Earlier in the session, I'd photographed a Douglas fir about 70 yards upslope. I knew that tree. I'd framed a shot around it maybe an hour before, and I had a decent sense of its height, somewhere around 14 feet tall. When the figure shifted slightly to the right, it passed directly beside that tree. And what was there? The proportions were all wrong. The arms hung too low, the shoulders were too wide for anything I've ever seen move on 2 legs. And the way it moved when it shifted, fluid, controlled, no wasted motion. Something that size should lumber. It didn't. It moved like it was completely comfortable in that body, in that terrain, in that dark. The thermal had already told me something was wrong with the size. Now my eyes were confirming it. 2 separate devices, same conclusion. I kept the camera on it and tried to find the explanation that made this make sense. I'm still looking. Most wild animals, the second they sense you, they're gone. That's just how it works. A deer, a bear, even a mountain lion. The moment they register a human presence that close, the instinct kicks in and they're out. I've never once had a large animal hold its ground for more than a few seconds when it knew I was there. This thing didn't move for 40 seconds. I know because the timestamp is right there on the footage. 40 seconds of it, just standing in that gray light, completely unbothered, not frozen in the way prey freezes, not sizing up an escape route, just present, aware, like it had decided this was exactly where it was going to be, and nothing about my being there changed that calculation. That's when it stopped feeling like a sighting. 40 seconds doesn't sound like much until you're standing in the dark counting every one of them, watching something that size make no move to leave. That's when it started feeling like something else entirely. Like I wasn't the one doing the observing. And then it turned, not away from me, toward me. The whole upper body rotated in my direction, slow, deliberate, no hesitation. And just like that, everything about this situation changed. Up until that moment, I'd been telling myself I was watching something that didn't know I was there, that I had the distance, the dark, the silence working in my favor, that as long as I didn't move, I was okay. That belief did not survive the turn, because the way it turned, there was no searching in it, no scanning the tree line, no trying to locate the source of a sound. It turned, and it was already looking directly at where I was standing, like it had known the whole time and had simply decided, at that moment, that it was done pretending otherwise. I didn't move. I don't think I breathed. The camera was still running, and some part of my brain was glad about that, because the rest of me had completely stopped functioning normally. Whatever this was, it was no longer something happening at a safe distance. It was looking at me. Then it started moving toward me. Not charging, not lunging, just walking, downslope in my direction, one deliberate step at a time. And I need you to understand something about what that feels like, because it's not what you'd imagine. You'd think the scariest version of this is something coming at you fast. It isn't. Fast at least makes sense. Fast is an animal reacting, a threat responding, something you can categorize. This was slow, unhurried, like it had already decided how this was going to go and saw no reason to rush. Every step it took closed the distance between us, and I could feel the weight of each one even from where I was standing. The ground doesn't lie. Something that size moving toward you has a presence that goes beyond what your eyes are telling you. You feel it in your chest. I still didn't move. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, and I overrode every single one of them because something deeper, something from 20 years of reading situations in the field, told me that running was the worst thing I could do right now. So I stood there, camera up, completely still, watching it close the distance between us, one slow, deliberate step at a time. It didn't stop. 50 yards, maybe less. That's where it stopped, close enough that I could hear it breathing. Not heavily, just the slow, steady rhythm of something completely at ease with the situation it was in. I was not at ease. I was standing completely still with a camera in my hands, trying to calculate whether 50 yards was a survivable distance if this went wrong. It stood there looking in my direction, and I had this feeling, I can't call it anything more than a feeling, that it had known exactly where I was from the moment I walked into that forest. Not from when I raised the camera, not from when the silence dropped. From the beginning, like my arrival hadn't been a surprise to it at all. I told myself I was projecting, that I was scared and reading intentions into behavior I didn't understand. But the feeling didn't go away. It just sat there the same way the figure was sitting there, patient, unbothered, completely in control of whatever this was. And that patience was the most frightening thing I'd encountered so far. That would change. That's when I heard it, behind me. Not upslope where the figure was standing, directly behind me. Movement in the undergrowth, deliberate, heavy, close. The kind of sound that takes about half a second to process and then hits you all at once when it does. I was not alone out there with one of these things. There were two of them. I didn't turn around. Every part of me wanted to, but I didn't, because turning my back on the figure in front of me felt like exactly the wrong move, and keeping my back to whatever was behind me felt just as wrong. So I just stood there, frozen between the two, staring straight ahead at the one I could see, while the one I couldn't see moved through the brush somewhere behind me. The GoPro on my bag was facing backward. It was capturing all of it. I didn't think about that in the moment. I was way past thinking about cameras, but whatever was moving through that undergrowth behind me, whatever was circling, whatever was deciding what to do next, it was all going onto that footage without me even knowing it. I was completely surrounded. At some point, my brain shifted out of pure panic and into something more like damage control. I started thinking about getting out, mapping the route back to the logging road in my head. The trail I'd come in on, the direction of the car, how long it had taken me to walk in. And that's when I realized the figure was standing directly on it, not near it, not beside it, on it. The only navigable route back through that terrain in the dark ran right through where it was positioned. I'd come up the slope from the left, the trail cut back down through the trees on the right, and somewhere in the middle of that was 8 or 9 feet of something that had just walked toward me and stopped. I didn't know if it was deliberate. I still don't know. But here's the thing. It didn't matter. Whether it had positioned itself there on purpose or whether it was coincidence, the result was the same. I had no clean way out. Going off trail in that terrain, in that darkness, with something else moving behind me, wasn't an option. Waiting for it to move wasn't guaranteed. And doing anything that might provoke a reaction from something that size, at that distance, with no help coming, that wasn't an option either. So I ran through my options, methodically, the way you do when panic isn't going to help you, and you know it. Running was out. Off trail in that darkness with uneven terrain, I didn't know well enough. I'd be on the ground in 30 seconds, and whatever was behind me wouldn't need to hurry. Calling out wasn't an option either. No signal, no one within range, and making noise felt like the worst possible idea given everything that was already happening. I thought about the car, 12 minutes away on a good day, moving fast on a known trail, the trail that was blocked. I thought about going wide, cutting through the trees and around the figure's position. But that meant moving directly through whatever was circling behind me, and I wasn't willing to do that. Every option I had carried real physical risk, every single one. And for the first time out there, for the first time in 20 years of solo trips into remote terrain, I genuinely didn't know if I was making it home. Not as a dramatic thought, just as a cold, practical assessment of the situation I was actually in. So I made the only decision that made any sense. I stayed completely still. I kept the camera up, and I waited. I don't know exactly how long it lasted. Time does something strange when you're that scared. My best estimate is somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes, but it felt like it existed outside of any normal measurement. The figure upslope didn't move. It just stayed on that trail, positioned exactly where it was, like it had all the time in the world. Maybe it did. What moved was everything else around me. The presence behind me didn't stay in one place. It shifted. Slowly, wide arcs through the undergrowth, moving from my left to my right and back again. Not charging, not retreating, circling, patient and deliberate in a way that felt less like animal behavior and more like something I didn't have a clean word for. Every time I thought it had stopped, I'd hear it again. A branch, a weight shift, something heavy placing one foot deliberately in front of the other, somewhere in the dark behind me. At one point, it moved close enough that I could hear the undergrowth parting. I have no idea how close that actually was. Close enough that I stopped breathing for a while. And through all of it, the forest stayed completely silent in every other way. No birds, no wind, nothing that wasn't directly connected to whatever was happening on that ridge. The whole place had cleared out and left me there alone with them, and the only sounds were the ones I didn't want to hear. Then, slowly, the movement behind me began to pull away. Not all at once. Gradually, the sounds grew quieter, more distant, and then they stopped. I didn't move. I didn't trust it. A few minutes after the sounds behind me went quiet, the figure moved. It didn't lunge, didn't charge. It just turned, the same slow, deliberate rotation it had done when it first faced me, and walked back into the tree line. 3, maybe 4 strides, and the forest swallowed it completely. No crash of branches, no sound of something fleeing. Just a controlled, unhurried exit, like it had somewhere else to be and had simply decided it was time. That's the part I keep coming back to. It didn't leave because I was scared of it. It didn't leave because something startled it, or because the light had changed, or because of anything I did. It left because it chose to, which means everything that came before, the approach, the positioning on the trail, the presence behind me, all of it, that was also a choice. I stood there staring at the spot where it had been for a long time after it disappeared. The forest was still completely silent. Nothing had come back. Nothing was moving, but I didn't feel clear. I didn't feel like it was over just because I couldn't see anything anymore. I don't know how long I stood there after it disappeared. Long enough that my legs started shaking, not from cold, just from the delayed physical response to everything my body had been holding in for the past half hour. I kept listening. That was all I could do. Every few seconds I'd pick a direction and just focus on it. Upslope where the figure had been, behind me where the other one had circled, the tree line to my left. Rotating through them slowly, waiting for a sound that would tell me one of them had come back. Nothing came. But here's the thing about silence after something like that. It doesn't feel the same as silence before it. Before, silence was just the absence of sound. After, it feels like something that could end at any moment. Like it's conditional. Like whatever is choosing to be quiet could choose differently. I gave it another few minutes. Then I made the decision to move. Slowly, quietly, no sudden movements. I clicked my headlamp back on, kept the camera running, and started picking my way back down toward the trail. Every step felt loud. Every branch that shifted in the wind felt like a response, but nothing responded. I made it to the trail, and I started moving toward the car. I made it back to the trail and started moving toward the logging road. Steady pace, not running, because running still felt wrong. I kept my headlamp on and my eyes forward, and I told myself that the hard part was over. It wasn't. About 3 minutes into the walk, I heard it. Something moving through the trees to my right, parallel to the trail, matching my pace exactly. Not ahead of me, not behind me, beside me. Every time I took a step, it took a step. Every time I slowed, it slowed. I couldn't see it. The tree line was too dark and too dense, and whatever was in there wasn't giving me anything to look at. Just sound. just the steady, deliberate rhythm of something that was keeping pace with me through the forest, like it was escorting me out. I didn't stop. Stopping felt like an invitation, so I just kept moving, kept my eyes on the trail ahead, and tried to control my breathing. It stayed with me the entire way out, every step of it. And then, right at the point where the trees ended and the logging road began, it stopped, just like that. The sound cut off the moment the forest did. I took 3 more steps onto the gravel, turned around, and looked back at the tree line. I couldn't see anything, but I knew something was there. It had walked me all the way to the edge and then just watched me leave. I got to the car, unlocked it, and got in. I didn't linger. I pulled the door shut, locked it, and sat there for a moment with the engine off, just listening. The tree line was maybe 20 feet from where I'd parked. I couldn't see anything in it, couldn't hear anything either. I started the engine and pulled out onto the logging road, kept the headlights on high the whole way out. I didn't stop, didn't look back, just drove until the logging road connected with the main road and kept going until I found a gas station with the lights still on. Pulled in, parked, and sat there for a few minutes before I felt like I could think straight. That was the first moment since before sunrise that I felt anything close to okay. And even then, okay is a strong word for it. I got home and sat down with the main camera footage that night. I wasn't ready to go through all of it. I just wanted to see what was actually on there. Whether the camera had caught what I thought it caught, or whether I'd been so rattled that my memory had filled in details that weren't real. It caught it, all of it. But that wasn't what stopped me cold. I was going through the early part of the recording before the figure stepped into the light, and I noticed something. In the footage, maybe 10 or 15 seconds before I raised the camera, the figure's head turns. Slightly, not dramatically, just a small rotation in my direction. I watched it 3 times to make sure I was seeing it right. And I was. It turned toward me before I raised the camera, before I made any movement at all, which means it wasn't reacting to me picking up the camera. It wasn't reacting to anything I did in that moment. It already knew exactly where I was. It had been tracking my position the whole time, and that small head turn was just the moment it stopped bothering to hide that fact. That detail didn't make it into my initial notes. I needed some time before I could think about what it actually meant. I went back 3 days later in daylight. I needed to see the area properly, and I needed to know if anything on the ground confirmed what I'd experienced. Large depressions in the soft soil upslope from where I'd been standing. Deep, spaced far apart, wider than my boot by a significant margin. Further up, a wide area of flattened vegetation pressed down in multiple layers. Not weather damage, something large returning to the same spot repeatedly over time. And 30 yards east of that, a sapling snapped clean at roughly 9 feet off the ground. No storm explanation. Clean break, like it hadn't taken much effort at all. I stood in the middle of all of it, and the conclusion wasn't complicated. This wasn't somewhere something had passed through once. This was somewhere something lived. The layered bedding site was what got to me most. Fresh impressions in soil I could explain as recent activity, but compressed vegetation in multiple layers takes time. That spot had been used repeatedly, over weeks at minimum, possibly much longer. Whatever I encountered up on that ridge hadn't wandered in from somewhere else that morning. It was home, and that means it was there before I arrived. It was there on the nights before Thursday. It was there when my trail camera was sitting on that tree, recording nothing but darkness, and then, apparently, something it hadn't been designed to catch clearly enough. It's still there now. That's the part that doesn't leave me. I drove home, I went back to my normal life, and whatever is living in that corridor kept doing exactly what it was doing before I showed up. I was the temporary one, I was the visitor. And the forest I've been treating as familiar territory my whole career. I'm not sure I know it as well as I thought I did. I didn't get to the GoPro footage until about a week later. I'd been putting it off. It had been facing backward the entire session. Everything behind me that I couldn't see while I was focused on the figure in front. The audio from when the second presence appeared is clear. Something large, circling, close. You can hear the direction shifting. You can hear it stop and start again. The walk back was what got me. I knew something had been pacing me through the trees. What I didn't know was how close. The GoPro puts it maybe 15, 20 feet into the tree line the entire way out, right there the whole time. And then, at the exact point where the forest meets the logging road, it stops. You can hear the gravel under my boots start and the forest go completely silent at the same moment. It walked me all the way to the edge, and the GoPro caught every step of it. I pulled the trail camera footage last. I almost didn't want to. It had triggered 11 times between midnight and 3:45 a.m., 15 minutes before I even parked. Something large had been moving through that corridor for hours before I arrived. By the time I walked in with my headlamp and my gear, whatever was up on that ridge had already been there most of the night. It wasn't passing through, it was already in position. I was the one who walked into it. When I put it all together, the trail camera timing, the figure on the trail, the second presence behind me, the GoPro audio, the unhurried exit, a pattern shows up that I can't dismiss. The trail camera shows it was already positioned up there before I arrived. The silence drop wasn't just a predator cue. It was the point where whatever was up there knew I was close enough. The figure came into view and held my attention forward while something else moved in behind me. The only trail out was blocked. And when they left on their own terms, at their own pace, with no urgency whatsoever. That's not random animal behavior. Every piece of it was coordinated. And the thing I keep coming back to, the thing I couldn't explain away no matter how hard I tried, is that it worked. I was completely controlled in that situation from the moment I walked in. I just didn't know it until it was already over. Right after the figure disappeared, before the forest sounds came back, I heard something. Low, resonant, felt in the chest more than heard with the ears. 2 seconds, then gone. I went back through the GoPro audio. It's there. I don't know what it means. I just know it's there on 2 separate records, and I'm done leaving it out. At the 12-second mark, the figure shifts its weight slightly, and the camera catches the musculature through the upper back and shoulders in a way that ends every costume argument. I've looked. A lot of people have looked. Nobody's found an explanation that holds up. I pulled the clearest frame from that moment and ran basic processing on it. What came back was a face, looking directly into the lens. That is the clearest Bigfoot sighting of June 2026. And the footage, there's no other word for it. It's mind-blowing, even to me. And I was there.